Hi guys, welcome to Revolutionary Motion. I'm Kata.
And I'm Clemens. And today we'll talk you through the basics of court positioning, including a neutral position, an offensive position, as well as a defensive position. Alright, so first we're going to talk about the neutral position. So as you can see, Kata is right in the middle over there, so she's going to show you where the opponent is going to move. In this case, imagine I hit a shot from my side. I have two options. I could go cross court, I could go down the line. My positioning after my shot heavily depends on where I hit the ball. If I hit the ball cross court, now Kata will move a little bit over to the side and show you where she's going to move in response to my cross court shot. Okay, this is obviously a very extreme cross court shot that we're going to show first. Now if I hit that ball cross court, Kata will be over there receiving the ball. If she's hitting from there, she has two options. Option number one, she goes cross court. Option number two, she goes down the line. Obviously, she could go in the middle, but that's not important for court positioning here. Let's cover the cross court option first. If she decides to hit the ball cross court, the best possible shot that she could hit would bounce roughly over here. Of course, she could hit a little bit more cross court, a little bit shorter, but that's a very extreme shot that doesn't happen too often in tennis. So if she hits the ball roughly over here, the ball would then cross the baseline, or the extension of the baseline, I should say, roughly over here from her position. Now this means that I have to cover, in the most extreme case, a shot that reaches all the way over here. So I would have to position myself over here to hit that ball roughly. Option number two, she hits down the line. If she hits the ball down the line and she hits the best possible shot she could hit, she would roughly hit this spot here. Maybe a little bit deeper, but it doesn't really make a difference for the angle. Now if she hits the line over here, the ball would cross the baseline roughly over here. So that means I only have to cover all the way up to over here. So as you can see, the spot where the ball crosses the baseline in both of those scenarios is very different. It is not the same distance to the middle on both sides. Which means if I stayed in the middle, I would be way closer to the down the line option than I would be to the cross court option. That's why it's not a good decision in this case to position yourself in the middle after you hit a cross court shot. Instead, you want to have the same distance to both of those options. Okay, so that would be roughly a little bit over here. So you can cover both of those options with the same amount of time. Now there's one difference. If I hit the ball down the line, Kata, move over there real quick. Very good. Now everything changes to the exact opposite sides. Now she could hit a cross court shot over here. The ball would cross the extension of the baseline over here. The down the line shot would roughly cross the baseline where the single sideline and the baseline intersect. Now that would push my positioning, my ideal positioning, a little bit over here. Now, of course, there are some situations when it's very good to position yourself right in the center of the court. But that only applies if you decide to hit the ball right down the center yourself. In that case, the best possible shot she could hit, no matter if she decides to hit a backhand or a forehand, would have the same distance to the middle. That means the middle spot here, right in the center, is the ideal position. Now, what does that mean for you? That means that the further your opponent moves to the side to hit a ball, the further you have to adjust to the opposing side. So if she decides to hit a little bit further on the forehand side, even if it's just a little bit, I adjust my perfect positioning a little bit over here. And the more I hit the ball cross court, the more I push her off the court, the more I have to position myself over here to cover both shots with the same efficiency. Alright, so the second situation is if your opponent is in the offense and you are in the defense. In this case, you see Kata on the baseline. Now imagine I hit a short, high ball, so she has to come forward a little bit to the service line roughly. If she hits the ball from there, the same thing kind of applies as what we did before. If she hits it further from over there, obviously it would be smarter to move a little bit over here to adjust to the changing angles. However, the problem with this is when your opponent is in the offense, like Kata is right now, you do not have time to react to a ball. So it doesn't matter as much if you're in the perfect position to get to both sides, because you're really just choosing one of the sides and you're defending that side. So you don't have to think about this as much, but what you have to think about more is to think about the patterns that your opponent used in the match thus far. So if your opponent chooses to always hit that shot cross court, it's probably a better option to cover the cross court shot than to cover the down the line shot. So you should start moving before she makes contact with the ball. One thing about that though is you cannot move too early. If you do, your opponent will just change their mind, play the ball to the other side very softly, and you have no chance of getting there. So the ideal time to start moving in the defense to a ball that your opponent hits is when she starts, or he starts, their forward swing. So when they're done with their back swing and now they're starting to move their racket forward, you can start moving. That gives you a bit of a head start, which then makes it a lot easier to reach a very good shot because you moved already before the ball is hit. Very important about this, study your opponent. You have to understand what kind of patterns your opponent uses in order to make a decision going forward and anticipate well. Alright, situation number 3 is when the opponent is in the defense and you are in the offense. Now when you get into the offense in a match, most of the time your opponent moves back a little bit. So this changes quite a few things for you. Number 1, it gives you more space in the angles. So angled approaches are most of the time not a bad idea because you're further away from your opponent. However, it doesn't change much for your own court positioning because you're just trying to follow the ball by anticipating well where your opponent is going to defend their shot to. So if you hit a great approach shot, for example, or you hit a great shot from the baseline and your opponent defends it, over the course of a match you get a feeling for where his defensive shot is going to land roughly. Now the same thing applies. You're trying to move slightly into that direction before the ball is even hit. So you have a head start going forward and you can really use that offensive position to your full advantage. Now if I'm moving forward and let's say the ball is on my forehand side, for example, and I hit the ball from over here. Kata is moving back. If she has no idea what's happening and she expects me to not hit it so hard, she will probably move a little bit towards her forehand side to make sure that she's covering the angles. The problem with that is, again, I can choose whatever I want to do. Now, what I would prefer to do in this situation many times is just hit a short ball because my opponents think that I'm going to hit a hard shot. One more problem about that though, if your opponent sees you change your grip very early to hit a drop shot, for example, they have an advantage as well because they will start moving before you hit the ball and now they will probably get to your shot, but you're in the middle of the court, so you're off position for the next one. So instead, you want to actually try to disguise your shot and pretend like you're hitting a normal hard shot and then change your grip and play that short ball after. That, most of the time, works against even very high-level players. As you can see, for example, on the Pro Tour, Nick Kyrgios uses that quite a lot against players like Nadal that tend to be way further back on the defense because they feel comfortable hitting it very hard from back there. One last thing is, if you decide to hit this drop shot, and now your opponent comes forward and tries to reach that drop shot. Like in Kata's case here, she's running forward, she's trying to reach it. There's a couple of different scenarios for your own court positioning. Scenario number 1, your opponent reaches the ball when it's very far down. Okay, so that means that you hit a very good drop shot. Your opponent's just barely reaching it, it's below the net. And from there, as you can see, it's not physically possible to hit the ball extremely hard because you would have to add a huge amount of spin to keep it inside the court because the ball is already below the net and your opponent is very close to the net. Since you're reaching for the ball, a lot of topspin is not an option either, so you can expect your opponent's shot to become very soft. Because of that scenario, you should actually step slightly inside the court because you want to cover the drop shot. You do not want to care too much about covering the deep shots just for the simple reason that the ball will not be fast enough to put you under intense pressure here. Most of the cases, if your opponent hits the drop shot and you're positioned somewhere here, slightly over on the cross-court side, as we talked about before, you have a very good chance at reaching drop shots on either side of the court. Most importantly, you have to do the split step here before. Don't rush forward while your opponent is hitting. You have to be stopped in the moment that your opponent hits the ball. Then you have a chance to reach both of those short balls. Now, in the off chance that your opponent decides to hit a deep shot, which puts you under a little bit more trouble and pressure than the short ball would, Now you still have a great chance at reaching the ball, even if I played it right in the corner, because you stopped here so you can move back if you need to. Now you might say, all right, I understand what you're saying, but the problem is if you're moving back to these, now you're in a defensive position. You're almost right. Yes, you're not in a very offensive position, but look where Kata is positioned. If a drop shot gets shorter and she's even 1 or 2 steps closer to the net, you can see that now I have a huge amount of court to play with. So most of the time, the easiest shot if you're reaching back here is a cross-court lob. Even if you hit it with a bad grip, with bad technique, and you just use your arm, playing it cross-court, deep, high shot is not the most difficult shot in the world. And again, this shot requires a lot of feel for your opponent to reach. So most of the time they won't hit a very good shot right in the corner over here. So you're actually in a very safe position positioning yourself over here, because you will be able to win the point in most situations unless you mess it up after. Now, second scenario for the drop shot. Kata has a higher ball. She can do whatever she wants. Now this is a bit of a problem for us, because it gets us in the same situation as if we just gave her a high defensive shot. She can do whatever she wants. So now it's again about anticipating what your opponent is going to do, seeing the patterns throughout the match thus far, and seeing how she dealt with these kinds of shots so far. And then you have to react accordingly. But again, remember, yes, this could happen to you, but that just means you don't have your drop shot under control, or you didn't disguise it well, or your opponent is just really fast. So you might have to adjust the tactics in those situations. Thank you guys for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed a little bit of insight about court positioning on the tennis court. And please like and subscribe, and we'll catch you guys soon.